Good morning. Pleasure to be here again. I think most of you probably know me by now. If you don't, I'm Ruth. I've been part of the People's Church here since 2010. It's 13 years, just crazy. I love being a part of this church family. It's amazing church, amazing community, amazing group of people. And it's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have the opportunity to share with you this morning. I'm following on from John's introduction to our new series last week. So John introduced us he went through the Beatitudes, or the attitudes what we should be, is how I always remember it, because I always thought Beatitudes was a weird word. And so I have the joy of following on the next part, and went to the Sermon on the Mount. And fortunately for me, it's a good one. So we're going to be looking this morning at the theme of salt and light. So, first question. Has anybody ever been to Las Vegas? A few of us. So, when Andy and I were first married, we spent a glorious, responsibility-free 7 months just travelling the world together. And as part of the trip, we rented an RV and we travelled across the United States, and part of that trip involved travelling through Las Vegas. And now I've been to 6 continents, I've been to a lot of countries, and I've never been anywhere in the world quite like Las Vegas. The truth is, the movies don't actually do it justice, I feel. It's far more epic than cameras can possibly capture, and every building is just off the charts in terms of scale and lights and detail and theming and special effects, and everyone is just battling to be more spectacular than the next. And there's hotels with like roller coasters coming out the roof, and pirate ships sinking, and Venetian canals and volcanoes erupting. And that's just when you walk down the pavement. That's not even getting into the buildings. It's completely bonkers, this whole place. I remember standing there open-mouthed, and just, it's spectacular. It's like, it makes Disneyland look like Gulliver's World. I mean, it's really bonkers. And I remember going into this hotel casino, I can't remember which one it was, but I was standing there open-mouthed, just like, wow, this is incredible. And next to me there was this family with young children doing the same thing. Standing there looking around, and they go, wow, look at that, look at that, are they real lions? Look at that, it's amazing. And suddenly I had this moment where I stopped, and I suddenly looked past the lights and the theming and the special effects and the spectacle all around, and I suddenly realised the waitresses were wearing next to nothing, and alcohol was being consumed by the bucket load, and there were people gambling away life savings everywhere you looked. Person after person was just engaged in all of the things that actually are the absolute opposite of what God would have for us and God would want for us. And it has been so sugar-coated to such an extent, this moral depravity, that you don't even see it. You don't even see that it's there. It glistens and it sparkles, and you smile and you take it in and you absorb it, and you think it's amazing, and you point it out to children, and you don't even see what it is you're looking at, because it's been coated in all this glistening sugar. And the reality is, beneath that spectacle is drunkenness and gambling and prostitution and affairs and drugs and exploitation and addiction and stealing and violence and lying and cheating. It's darkness and decay all around. Darkness and decay, and we don't even see it because it's so cool. And sometimes I feel as though Vegas is like a super exaggerated version of the world around us. Do you ever look at the news or TV and just think, man, it's so dark? Just watching Happy Valley, you think, man, it's dark, isn't it? The world is dark and broken. And so much of that dark stuff that the world is rammed with isn't even hidden or considered shameful anymore. It's completely acceptable. Mainstream TV teaches us it's healthy and normal to watch pornography. It's completely normal. Cannabis smoked openly in the street. Walk through Partington, you'll find that is completely true. Sex with anyone, of any gender, at any time, for any reason, is the social norm. Completely acceptable. You can gamble at any time, in any form, using one of the 2,400 betting apps available on your phone. Just like that. Did you know you can get a divorce online for a mere £249? Just like that. You know, young people in our culture, you may be well aware of this, you may be completely unaware, let each other know they're interested in one another now by swapping pictures of their private parts. Completely normal in this society. I find myself regularly fighting a losing argument that goes, if you can easily steal it, why would you pay? People say this to me all the time, but they account for it. The shops account for it, they account for the loss, so why would I pay? The moral decay of society just over my lifetime is absolutely terrifying, and it just keeps getting more and more rotten with every passing year. Almost all of it is now socially acceptable and normal and expected and sugar-coated TikTok fun, and half the time we don't even notice how utterly and completely wrong it is according to God's plan for us, according to God's standard, according to the way that God says this is how you should live. So in Matthew 5, verse 13 to 15, it says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house." Now, today we mostly use salt for flavour, but in this passage, I don't think Jesus was really overly suggesting we need to give the earth a nice flavour. Life's a bit bland, you should make it more flavoursome. I think here Jesus is mostly referring to salt as a preservative, because that's what it would mostly be used for in his day. If you don't have a fridge, and they didn't have fridges, meat was completely covered in salt, and that would preserve the meat for a really long amount of time, potentially forever. It stops rot and decay. Salt stops rot and decay. When Jesus said, "You're the salt of the earth," he intended us to stop the rot and the decay. And we need to open our eyes to the rot and the decay in the world around us. Every single day, the distance between what God says is right and what the world says is right grows a little bit more and decays a little bit more. And the first thing is we need to open our eyes and see it. We need to stop being distracted by the sugar coating. We need to stop listening to influencers and pretty memes and TikTokers and literally anyone that grabs your attention, anyone that sounds like they're smart, and start looking at what the Word of God says. What does the Word of God say about this? Check out his standard. Measure decisions against his standard. Allow yourself to be swayed and influenced by his standard, and start seeing what's underneath that sugar coating. Let's start to look at sin for what it is. Let's stop trying to justify it. Let's stop trying to hide it or ignore it. And let's be people of truth who call it out for what it is. The problem is that even when we spot sin, let's say in a friend's life, nobody wants to rub salt in the wound. You don't actually want to be that person, do you, rubbing salt in the wound? It's not nice and it hurts. When I'm trying to get Beth to take a tablet, she's terrible at taking tablets. She can't do it. She can't swallow them. So I often use syrup, because a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I was taught as a child. So I sugarcoat the medicine, sugarcoat the tablet to make it more palatable. And I think sometimes that we try to do the same, don't we? The problem is that, Beth is still terrible at swallowing the tablets. In fact, she swallows all the sweet syrup and then spits the tablet back out. So it doesn't even work. The other day, it was quite funny actually. She was really upset, and I'm trying to give her these tablets. So she'd have the spoon with the tablet on it, and she'd swallow it, and then take a swig of water, and I'd be like, there, you did it. And she'd hand me the bottle, and there was like the tablet just sitting in the bottle of the water, in the bottle of the water. By the time we'd done, there was 3 tablets in the bottom. I was just like, I'm giving up. This is not working. But have you ever tried to speak to someone about something, and actually you tried to sugarcoat it so much they've just totally missed it? Because you didn't want to come out and just say it. You didn't want to just point it out. You didn't want to highlight the sin or the fault or the problem or the direction they're going in. So you kind of try to make it a little bit more palatable, and they just miss it altogether. It happens, doesn't it? That's exactly what I look like trying to give Bethany a medicine, by the way, with the penny and everything. But Jesus, sadly, doesn't say with the golden syrup of the earth. Doesn't even say the maple syrup of the earth. He says with a salt. And sometimes when we do spot the rot and the decay and the pure sin, the temptation is to throw our hands in the air in judgment and grumble and despair and just go, the world is an absolute mess. What are we supposed to do about it? But perhaps we need to spend more time asking, where is the salt? Who is telling the truth? Who is holding people to account? Who is challenging those that are in the wrong, even when it's people in authority over us? Who is affecting social change for good, whether that's challenging a friend, speaking up in a workplace, using your voice on social media, standing for truth in school, or even nationally? Do you sign petitions? Do you write letters to people with power? Who is speaking up and speaking truth? Where is the salt? If there's no salt, be the salt. And do you know what? Even if there is salt, be more salt, because I guarantee the salt will appreciate the backup. It's our job to preserve, to cleanse, to call out the bad, to stop the rot, to tell the truth, and to be the salt. There's a funny bit after Jesus talks about being the salt where it says, if salt loses its saltiness, you can't get it back. And once it's gone. And the reality is, salt can't actually lose its saltiness. Salt is salt. So it seems on the surface like a weird thing for Jesus to say. But Jesus of salt would have literally come from here. So this is the salt by the Dead Sea. And they literally would gather that and use that for salt. But there weren't any refineries. So the salt that they gathered was full of dust and rock and all kinds of rubbish with the salt. So it would have been completely contaminated. So as they're using the salt is incredibly soluble. So the first thing that would have dissolved as they were using the salt was the salt. And what was left behind, they would have called salt, but would actually just been a load of road dust and rock. So the white powder would have existed, but it was no longer salt. So it would have seemed like it was salt losing its saltiness, but actually it was salt dissolved. That makes sense? Yeah? So what I think the point is, we need to keep ourselves as salt pure and free of contamination. You know, it's nice to think that if we're contaminated, if we mess up, we can pull it back again and be salty again. But the truth is that once you've publicly screwed up, you lose an awful lot of your saltiness. Do we listen to hypocrites? Not so much. If you think of the list of influential Christian leaders who've fallen from grace over the last few years, and do we still listen to them? Do we still read their books? They're gone, aren't they? It's like they screwed up. Who's next? And God's grace is there. There's forgiveness and there's grace and there's restoration and all of that stuff. So then personally, they are restored and they are redeemed if they wish to be. But in terms of their saltiness, in terms of their reputation, in terms of their influence, that ain't coming back. We have to keep ourselves pure privately so we don't lose our saltiness publicly. So let's be honest, so far, being salt doesn't actually sound like much fun or very easy. The world is massive and the influences on it are massive and media is massive and social media is massive and there's 8 billion people in the world, all with different ideas. You may well be sitting there thinking, Ruth, I'm not famous, I'm not gifted, I'm no more gifted than the person sitting next to me. Literally no one listens to me or cares what I think. I hate being judged and criticised. I don't want to be trolled online. I'm full of anxiety and doubt and fear, and I already want to disappear under a duvet and never emerge from it most of the time. Why on earth would I start sticking my neck out, bringing added attention to myself, start telling people what God thinks is wrong? It's never going to happen. And now I have a whole load of failure to be salt added to my already feeling a failure about most things in life. Thanks for that. You're welcome. The great news is that although being the salt of the earth might sound like something that makes you want to run away from God altogether, the next part of the verse makes it all look and feel a little bit different. So just over 20 years ago, I was a lot younger than I am now, just over 20 years younger in fact, and I was very stupid, I was very far from God, and I screwed up my life massively. I made some terrible decisions. And after a very rough period of time, where, I was in a big mess, God intervened. I won't tell you the story now, but he intervened and he healed me and he restored me and he changed my thinking. And as I looked at my life, and my life was ahead of me, I was 20, so I was just coming to my adult years. And at this point, your life can go in a million different directions, can't it? And I'd done the living for myself thing, and I'd realised, I'm very logical, and I'd realised that I clearly make bad decisions, and I'm selfish, and I'm stupid. And so living my way probably wasn't going to go great. So up to that point, it'd not been great. Living God's way, who knows me and loves me and has good plans for me, or so he says, seemed to make sense. So I figured if he knows what's best and he has a plan and I can follow the plan and he says he'll work all things for my good and my glory and he loves me, the most sensible thing I can do is try to stick to it. So I decided to try and stick to it. I decided to try and stick to the moral how to live stuff. I tried to stick to the salt and light stuff, and I tried to care about what he thinks and not what people think. And I discovered the more interesting verses as well. I started to take them quite literally. So things like the parable of the talents. I thought, okay, I'll use what little I've got and see what happens. And God gave me more. And verses like, through us, God's able to do more than I can ask or imagine. I thought, that sounds cool, because I've got quite a good imagination. So I took that literally, and I started to dream, and I started to imagine, and I started to think about what life could look like, what my life could look like, what other people's lives could look like. And God did more than I could ask or imagine. So then I imagined bigger things. And it kept going, and it is still going. Now, don't get me wrong, I screw up every day, all the time. It's not like I'm standing here going, I've got this. I'm just telling you the decision I made 20 plus years ago. And I'm still doing my best to follow in my flawed, broken way. And the thing is, I decided right then, I had all the salt stuff. I don't want to be criticised, I don't want to be judged, I don't want to draw attention to myself, all of that. But I also decided I didn't want to be like everybody else. I wanted my life to make a difference to someone. And I wanted my life to count for something. And I wanted to be an example, and I wanted to be a dreamer. I wanted to be different to the world, and I wanted to love people fiercely. I wanted people to ask about Jesus because of the way I live. And I wanted to empower others, and I want to be uncomfortable and bold and brave and figure out God's path and follow him there. And I want to be the light, and I want to see what happens when you keep saying yes. And I suspect that deep down, if we're honest, even though we just agreed with some of that soul, anxiety, failure stuff too, that you agree with me. and that you probably want those things too. And that's what it means to be the light. That's what it means to live different. It means taking a stand. It means feeling the fear, but taking God at his literal word when he says he can do more than we can ask or imagine. We can't live effectively with a foot in both camps. One in the world and one in God's kingdom. And the anxiety shadows and one in the life God has for us. We'll get it wrong and we'll screw up. We all do. I do every day. But we admit it, we say sorry, we come back, we dust ourselves down and we go again. The salt is vital. We've got to be salt people, truth people. But it goes hand in hand with light for a reason. Light guides. Light brings hope. Light is good deeds. Light is the good news of Jesus. Light is loving, and light brings warmth, and light destroys darkness. When I was at college, I did photography, a unit of photography, which was great, and we learned to do proper photography in the dark room and stuff. And what was interesting about the dark room, if you've ever been in a proper dark room, is that it is completely dark. But it only takes, because it's so dark, your eyes adjust to like pure darkness. And this tiniest crack of light, if there was one, dot of light coming through the door, even the tiniest bit, you saw it. Because light always breaks through darkness. Doesn't matter how dark it is. If there is light in there, light wins. Darkness cannot overcome it. Being salt is so much easier when you bring the light as well. When you do both together. Being able to go, this is messed up and wrong and needs to change. But don't worry. There's hope. There's hope. Here is the hope. Here is the food you need. Here is the love that you need. Here is the support that you need. Here is the truth that you need. Here's the money that you need. Here is Jesus. There is hope. This is bad. This is wrong. This is going to mess your life up. But don't worry. It's good news because I have the answer. I have the light. I have the hope. You may have heard me say before, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. It's completely true. We have to love people. Being the light allows us to be the salt. Salt Christians, without the light, they're the people that give us the bad reputation, that just go around pointing fingers, upsetting people, and don't live a life of love that goes alongside with it. We can't do salt on its own. We have to be salt and light. And if we're only light, there's no truth in there. People won't stray from the path that they're on. There has to be both. Living a life that puts others first gives you the right to share the truth. Living a life that's right before God and not hypocritical gives us the right to point others to truth. If you've got a plank in your eye, sort it out. Take the plank out so that we can be salt. As we worship and as we respond now, let's think about who we want to be. What's stopping us? Do we need to stop ignoring God's... Does that make sense? Yeah. Do we need to stop ignoring God's truth? We take God's truth and we just go, actually, and we need to deal with sin. Do we need to learn what the Bible really says and understand why it says it? Do we need to challenge others and be the salt? Do we need that boldness? It takes courage. It does take courage to speak out. Do we need to make that decision to be the light, to live a life that counts, giving everything over to him and saying, God, I'm just going to go your way. I'm just going to give it all to you. I'm just going to go in the direction you want me to be. All of my life, every part, every single bit of it, it's all yours. Let's just do light. Let's just do light. Is it time to step out into the all we can ask or imagine? Do we need to dream big dreams for him? Do we need that boldness and that courage to say, God, this thing that's been bugging me for years, that I've had on my heart for years, that I've done nothing about, it's time. It's time to step out. It's time to step up. It's time to just do it. I need to stop being scared. I need to stop looking at my circumstances and going, oh, I can't possibly. And just trust God. Take God at his word. When he says, I will do more than you can ask or imagine, he will do it. It's a testimony of my life. He will do it.